Welcome to the debate. Today we're looking into the Gospel of John, specifically why its portrayal of Jesus feels so radically different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The core question is, well, is John mainly a historical account using signs to make people believe, or is it really this sophisticated theological, almost philosophical work defining the divine word, the Logos? I lean towards the first view. John is an intentional story focused on evidence, with a clear evangelical goal.
And I suppose I'm taking the other side. While belief is obviously important, I'd argue John's fundamental structure is metaphysical. It uses philosophical language, this dualistic thinking, that I think goes beyond just recounting historical events.
Well, the text itself seems pretty direct about its purpose, right there in chapter 20, verse 31. These are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. The whole thing is structured around these signs. Think about turning water into wine in Cana. Chapter 2 says, it manifested his glory and his disciples believed in him. The healing of the official son, raising Lazarus. These are presented as visible proofs, all geared towards, conversion and the promise of eternal life.
Okay, I see the point about the stated purpose and the signs, but doesn't that maybe downplay the enormous significance of the prologue? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's a massive philosophical and theological statement right up front. It sets a logos framework, this idea of pre-existence. So maybe the narrative that follows is less about just a sequence of historical events and more about demonstrating that inherent divinity. Like the big I am statements, I am the bread of life. These seem primarily about defining his cosmic, metaphysical identity, not just explaining a miracle like feeding the 5,000. The history seems to serve the word, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm not fully convinced that the purpose statement in chapter 20 is the only key to understanding the structure. If John were purely focused on, let's say, verifiable signs for everyone, why lean so heavily on these stark dualisms? Light versus darkness, above versus below, like in chapter 3 or chapter 8. It feels like a rhetorical structure designed to separate. It suggests a community defining itself against the world that, as John puts it, hates them.
And the repeated fear of being put out of the synagogue. Doesn't that point towards a text functioning almost as a polemic, solidifying a distinct theological identity for those inside?
That's an interesting point about the community conflict, though I might frame that dualism a bit differently. Yes, there's conflict, but doesn't the light versus darkness structure primarily illuminate the fundamental choice, the cosmic choice between belief and unbelief? Like John 3:18 says, focusing on Jesus as the light of the world, it highlights him as the source of life itself, presenting this clear, universal decision point for everyone, especially those who, as the text says, loved darkness rather than light. So it sets the stakes beyond just one specific community's struggle, It frames it in terms of creation and ultimate destiny. And also, look at how Jesus is characterized. In the Synoptics, there's often a sense of Jesus maybe growing into his mission. But John presents a Jesus who seems fully aware from the start, who knew all things that would come upon him, as chapter 18 says. He constantly speaks of his divine origin, his return to the Father. This consistent portrayal of divine consciousness feels very intentional. It's presenting the Son of God operating with full knowledge of who he is and where he's going. That's a theological statement built into the narrative itself, not just a side effect.
I'm not quite persuaded by that because that consistency, it could easily be seen as a theological retrojection, right? Meaning the later church's fully formed understanding of Jesus is projected back onto the narrative. When Jesus says things like, I have come down from heaven, it immediately causes conflict and misunderstanding in the story itself. He has to keep explaining his unique metaphysical origin. It feels like the text is deliberately crafted so the reader grasps the divine status first and foremost.
Think about before Abraham was, I am. That's a statement designed to shock and assert that metaphysical identity above all else. It really emphasizes the divine priority, it seems to me. So ultimately, I think John really forces us to engage with these very high Christological claims. It frames Jesus' life within this powerful, philosophical structure that revolves around the divine word existing before creation.
I agree the Christology is incredibly high, yes, but I still maintain that these profound theological claims are tied directly, inextricably, to the specific things he did, the signs. They are written that you may believe. John is offering this assurance of life based on a commitment that's prompted by both tangible evidence and this revealed divine identity.
Well, I suppose what we can agree on is the sheer depth of this gospel. Both perspectives show how it operates on multiple levels, as perhaps theological reflection and narrative witness simultaneously. There's clearly a lot more to unpack here.